Good afternoon. I'm Dale Benoit, the immediate past chair of GNO Inc. On behalf of GNO Inc. and Michael Galk, I want to welcome you all here this afternoon. Michael sends his apologies, but he's traveling out of the country. We just finished a 2-hour roundtable discussion, and I want to thank David Miller and his team from FEMA on being very informative. Our delegation participated, members of our parish presidents from throughout the region participated. It was a lively discussion, a lot of fact-finding, and a lot of information that we need to help solve the problem about flood insurance in our area. So with that, I'd like to call on Senator Mary Landrieu to begin remarks from our delegation.
Thank you, Dale. I'm going to say just a few words and then call on the members of the delegation in seniority order, and then we're going to ask Dave Miller to speak, and then any parish presidents that are here can come forward and make a comment, and then we'll have some question and answer time. This issue before us is one of the greatest challenges, in my view, that South Louisiana, and the Gulf Coast has faced in a long time. And we have got to find a solution for it very quickly. Because of new laws and some administrative action on the part of FEMA, there are thousands of people in our state, thousands of homeowners, businesses, commercial properties, realtors and bankers at great risk because of the policies that are coming out of Washington, D.C. So our delegation is united across party lines, geographic lines, to work with our partners in other states to find some immediate solutions. That's what today was about, looking for solutions. And I want to thank Dave Miller and the FEMA team who have come down here, who have been called on to put Biggert's waters in place by the law, but we're going to ask them to delay as much of that law as possible because of the catastrophic consequences that are going to occur to many of our people. But I thank Dave and his team for coming. They got to see from the air 8 or 10 parishes to see levees so that they can understand we're mitigating against flood by building levees with our own local funds as well as state and federal funds, and we need some relief on flood insurance. It is crucial for our economy, and our economy has a great impact on the whole nation, not just us. So the final thing I'll say, and call Senator Vitter, since our state of Louisiana drains 40% of the North American continent, and we basically absorb and distribute or take 40% of that water, not counting the rain that falls here on top of us, but rain and ice that melts and comes down from the rest of the country. We believe that this is a shared responsibility and that the people of Louisiana cannot be priced out of a place that we've been for 300 years. So we're going to fight united. Let me ask Senator Vitter to make a comment.
Thanks, Mary. I also want to thank Mr. Miller and his FEMA team for spending time here. I think it was very productive. And I also want to thank all of the parish presidents, local leaders, business civic leaders who made today so productive and have been working very hard with us as a team to educate other members of Congress and the country to what we need to do. Today, I asked Mr. Miller 3 key questions, and I'm asking him to take those back to the administration, Craig Fugate, and to get answers. Craig Fugate will be the main witness at a hearing we're having on this issue in September in Senate Banking, on which I serve. And I'll be re-asking those questions and expecting meaningful answers. First of all, will the administration delay unworkable parts of Biggert Waters? There was no forecast before of not just rate increases, but completely catastrophically unaffordable rate increases. We now know that parts of that are unworkable. The president just delayed a major part of Obamacare for that reason. FEMA is delaying the very study on affordability that's in Biggert Waters. So the first question is, will the administration delay these parts of Biggert Waters that would cause not just any rate increase, but catastrophically unaffordable rate increases? The second question is, will FEMA not release any new maps until it absolutely has all of the processes worked out to get the mapping right, including but not limited to the land process? And will they recommit to be fully engaged with local jurisdictions to get it right? And the third question is, we need leadership on this issue. Will they join us and propose specific fixes to Biggert Waters to address particularly the affordability issue? We have proposed specific fixes. We would like specific recommendations from them. And so far, quite frankly, the administration has been deafeningly silent on that. And we want and invite specific proposals to fix these aspects of Biggert Waters. Again, I thank everybody who made today very productive.
I too want to thank David Miller for coming down and bringing his team, because they didn't just come down to sit in what I thought was an important roundtable with community leaders, but they not only flew over a lot of those flood protection systems, but actually walked some of the flood protection systems too. In fact, we checked David's shoes. He's got dirt from some of those levees that FEMA up until now said don't exist. Levees that have protected communities from flooding. Many of the cases, levees that were built by local communities with their own tax dollars, not with federal money. And those flood protection systems protected those communities from flooding. FEMA's got to recognize that they exist and that they work when they're evaluating and implementing Biggert Waters. That was one of the many things we talked about. It was important to have them sitting down talking to levee district leaders who are on the front lines, in many cases doing work that the Corps of Engineers itself doesn't do nearly as well, nearly as quickly, and at nearly the cost. They build levees at a much cheaper cost and actually work. These levees work. So this is something that's got to be factored in as we move forward. And this is something our entire delegation is united on. We are united in fixing this problem. Biggert Waters, as it came to be, you actually had Maxine Waters on the House floor saying catastrophic rate increases was never something that was anticipated when she helped pass the law that has her name. And so when we were flying over some of these communities that are behind flood protection systems, as we were looking at an oil refinery that produces gasoline and other products for our country, we're also looking at the houses that house the workers for those refineries. And those people, if they get a $20,000 bill from FEMA for a flood insurance policy, it's just not sustainable. It's not something they're going to be able to pay. So if FEMA thinks that this is going to help get to actuary rates, you're literally going to be forcing people out of their houses. And so there's got to be a workable way to implement the law. And these are all things that we're working on in a unified way in our delegation. But I think if you looked at the first test vote that we had in Congress, in the House, a few weeks ago, where we finally started to debate Biggert Waters in a narrow way, but in a broader way as well, you had a large bipartisan vote in the House of Representatives to say this isn't something that's workable. We've got to make sure you don't throw people out of their homes when you're trying to implement reforms to the flood insurance program, which had many flaws. So I think it's very important that he came down, brought his team with them, and not just looked and listened, but actually helped talk to us about some of the things we're working on here to solve this problem.
I will add to what is being said, add an echo. Fundamentally, this is about families, not about second homes, vacation homes built on the coast with disposable income, but about people who do work in these factories, people who are trying to send their kids to better schools, create a better future for future generations. And as I think Parish President Rowbottom pointed out, for some of these families, they don't have the extra income to pay these higher premiums. If these are priced in such a way they can no longer afford, it actually undermines the National Flood Insurance Program. Families will have to do without flood insurance in order to make their other bills. And so there is kind of someone called it a catch-22. We're going to make it actuarially sound on the backs of working class families who can't afford to do it, so therefore we are going to undermine the program by pricing them out of participation. This is ultimately about families. And from then it goes to the soundness of the program. Next, it's about science. One of Mr. Miller's assistants said they want to have good science. That's what we want too. If there is a flood control structure, a mitigation process that decreases risk, then why in the heck is it not being considered? We know that it is not. And so we can meet on the common ground of using good science to find out what truly is a family's risk. But never lose sight of the fact that if we don't do this right, that family will have no choice but to not participate. At that point, that oil being produced in St. Charles Parish is not going to Pennsylvania. And I can go down the list, that boat being built in Terrebonne and Lafourche is not supporting the industry. This goes beyond our community, but most importantly, it goes to families. Now, working families of Louisiana support the rest of the country. Again, I thank Mr. Miller for coming down, and I thank all these parish presidents for the insights that they provided. So.
Well, thank you. I want to actually thank a number of people as we get started here, to the congressional delegation that invited us down, Senator Landrieu, to you and your staff for arranging everything. We had some discussions prior to coming down with Senator Vitter and some of the parish presidents on this very issue. I've learned a lot, and a lot of it from the parish presidents about the uniqueness of the area, how it's going to affect families as we walk through this. But I think the senators and the representatives laid it out for you in three key components. One is getting the science right, and we talked about that. We talked about the levy analysis and mapping process that we're going through, that we're engaging in some of the parishes now, how that evolves into the future, and what we've committed to is working to get that science right. And where we have disagreements on the application of science, how we can come to agreement by looking at independent verification and validation of how we apply those methods. At the same time, as we're doing that, one of the other things is, and this is a part of Bigger Waters that's there, and it gets to the crux of some of the matter. One of the things that Congress asked us to do, many in Congress asked us to do, this doesn't speak to the affordability provision, but it does speak to the rates, is to establish rates that reflect the risk. So as we apply the science, the question is what rate really reflects that risk? And what we're hearing from parishes simply those huge increases in insurance that may reflect a risk, and that's part of what we're arguing about, is does the money really represent the risk, the premium? But in doing that, what does that do to property and property values? What does that do to the structure of communities? What does that do to current homeowners and future homeowners as they consider how to build, where to build, and whether they're going to buy property? That is a part of the affordability discussion. So it's not just about the ability for somebody to pay the premium, it's the whole financial impact in a community. And we're discussing more and more of that as we go through. Which gets us to that last part, the affordability part. There isn't a lot of room in the law to talk about how we apply it, although it asked us to study that. We've been talking about, can we delay the implementation of certain provisions of the law as we find the answers to a number of the questions that we have. And the truth is we want to move it towards right. One of the major provisions in the law, without getting technical, is about how we map and how we map changes and getting the data right. The truth is that's not going to be implemented in our best case scenario until the fall of 14. And it's because we're going through the processes to figure out what it means to do the rulemaking that we may have to do, although we think a lot of this will be policy, to figure out how we're going to share the data, how we're going to go through mapping changes, who's going to be affected, when they're going to be affected, and how that's going to impact areas. We want to get it right as well. So the discussion we've had today, that truth on the ground, seeing it in the parishes, seeing what they've built, how we can talk about the science and implement that, how that affects the affordability, is something we really want to talk and go back and talk about. The last thing that Senator Vitter talked about legislation, one of those areas is I can provide technical drafting assistance on legislation, but proposing it is a different matter, and that's one I will take back to the boss. I'm sure it'll get a lot of discussion when we get back to DC. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We normally go in seniority. Do y'all want to do the same? Who's the most senior member?
Who's the oldest?
Who's the office?
PJ, you want to go first?
PJ, go ahead.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank Senator Landrieu for putting this together and all congressional delegation for supporting us on this very important issue. I've been parish clerk for 5 years, and this is the most united I've ever seen our congressional people. When they found out in March what the impact of the biggest law was going to have, they immediately went to work, got together, crossed party lines, and working for our people. But let's be honest, and the reason why we're standing here today is the failure of the Corps of Engineers when the engineering error occurred on the 17th Street Canal. If we wouldn't be standing here today, that didn't happen. And part of the driving force of the biggest waters is because of Hurricane Katrina. I don't think it's fair for our people, I don't think it's fair for the federal government to ask our people who had nothing to do with the increase in rates to help borrow this astronomical rates. In my parish alone, it's gone from $655 a year to $25,000. These people have built up equities in their home, and some of these people use that to put a second mortgage on their house to send their kids to college. That all goes away. They got to walk away from it. It becomes a ghost town. Parish government suffers, hospitals suffer, school board suffers, fire department suffers. It's just a trickle-down effect. So this is a very issue that we have to stop. I think we're in the right direction. We have a long way to go, and we need all the support we can get in our congressional delegation. We hope you'll stay on top of this and fight this to the end. Thank you.
We've been through many hurricanes and an oil spill. This bill will have a greater impact on coastal Louisiana than all of those put together. We pulled ourselves up from the hurricanes and from the oil spill. This will destroy coastal Louisiana. Also, we've got to educate the rest of the country. As we heard today, and thank you so much for this trip, other areas of the country wanted to be self-sufficient, so do we. They don't know what's coming. California doesn't know. New York and the rest of the country, all states have flooding. We need to educate them to get on board to change this horrible law. And last but not least, I've been asking a question for over a year. What does this policy cost us? Our insurance guys write the policy and send it on with no risk. I learned today that we're paying 30% for overhead expenses. No wonder it's upside down. That's criminal in itself. 30% to manage this upside down program. That's absurd. I don't know if anyone else is mad, but I'm angry today. That's got to be fixed. Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to thank Senator Landrieu and, of course, the delegation and Mr. Miller. I think it was a very beneficial trip for all of us. We have been working very closely together, and I think what it should show is, one, that we have a very unique area, and it's unique in its people as well as our property and the concerns that we share. But what I hope you all learned as well is that we're willing to help. We're willing to do some things ourselves. However, we cannot bear the cost of this entire program on our own, and that what has been passed will be detrimental to our communities. I am from St. John Baptist Parish, and our communities are attempting to recover now. They're still trying to get back into their homes, and if they are forced to pay premiums that we predict will come about, they will not be back in their homes. Our community cannot be restored, and that will happen throughout the country. So one, I hope that you see what our unique status is and that we're willing to participate. And we have a unique presence and understanding and engineering of our communities because we know what's necessary to sustain them. It's out of a need that we've made changes, and we need the Corps of Engineers to understand that as well. So we appreciate you being here. We look forward to continuing our conversations, and we're just very appreciative of our delegation for supporting and working with us. Thank you.
When you go second to last, it's hard to add anything else, but I will like to thank our entire congressional delegation and Senator Landrieu for arranging this trip. I'd like to thank David Miller for actually coming down here back in May, and I'd like to thank GNO Inc. We went up to Washington with GNO Inc., and Mr. Miller committed to coming down here, and I'm glad he did come down here, and I think he learned a lot today, and hopefully we'll learn a lot more tomorrow with boots on the ground, because when you see something and when you walk it, it's a lot different from looking at it in black and white on a piece of paper. But when we went up to Washington in May, we talked to the actual staffers who helped write the bill for Congresswoman Waters, and they said that y'all are the first group we've heard anything about. We didn't know there was any problem with this legislation, and we all know with legislation there are unintended consequences. And we said at that time, we may be the first group, but we're not going to be the last. This is not just a Southeast Louisiana issue. It's not just a Louisiana issue. It's a national issue. And Billy stole my line, but this, if allowed to go unchecked and unamended, will be more devastating than every storm we've been through, including Katrina and since Katrina, and even the BP oil spill. Because this is going to ruin our local economies. This is going to destroy home ownership. It's going to have an effect on the real estate market, the banking industry, and ultimately on local government. relies on these tax revenues. When those properties' values go up and when those properties can't be sold, and when people can't afford to insure those properties. So we're at a major crossroads here. I would appeal to Mr. Miller, as we did in the room, that obviously there's still, although we've answered some questions, there's still more questions than answers at this point. And I think the prudent approach would be to delay the implication or the effect of this Bigot Waters until we can provide those answers, until we can come up with affordability issues and answers to those. Because at the end of the day, this is going to be a freight train that's going to hit people. And a lot of people in a lot of communities don't even know what's coming on that track. So I think what we need to do is take a step back, give us time to work it out. None of us want any handout. We all agree it needs to be sustainable, but as I said in the room, it is going to be a catch-22. Because if this goes allowed, unchecked and unadmitted, it won't achieve that goal of sustainability. In fact, it will have the opposite effect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And being last, I will make it very short because I think you've heard, next to last. Yeah, I think you've heard all of our concerns, and thank you, Mr. Miller, for coming down with your staff. And GNO Inc., we did make that first trip, and as John said, we were told we were the first, and we said we won't be the last. But what we need right now is more information, real data that we can take to the rest of the country, because believe me, when they hear what's coming, they're going to be just as upset, just as worried as we are about their homes. So we will keep asking for all the information, because the worst thing we can do is give out false information and then lose our credibility. We want to take the facts to other parts of the country so they join us and let you know how serious it is to all of us. And I'd also like to thank the delegation. They have worked side by side from day one to get us to this point and promise us they'll go further. So thank you all for helping.
Yes, I'm the youngest. Don't let the great fool you, that mean. How did this even start? You know, in St. James Parish, if I would go to my parish council and say, hey, I want sewage, I want levies, and by the way, at the same time, let's lump it into an ordinance, we're going to allow our people to blow up fireworks for every major event we have. Let's get that passed next week and get it done. That's what happened with Bigot Waters. And you know, before I even go on, I need to really say, Senator, thank you for making this happen, along with GNO Inc. Because this is one of the most important days in Louisiana, believe it or not, because those of you in that room just now, we still learning about this. We still learning about things none of us really know, because it looks like it keeps changing as we have these meetings. In saying that, and getting back to where I started from, can you imagine what our problem is? Our problem is, first, is not just a Louisiana issue, which a lot of people think it is. Y'all heard some of these guys. California don't know. I bet you the Missouri Valley, the Mississippi Valley, they don't really know. Our job here is to educate the people across these 50 states. They need to get on board, because a lot of their own residences, and of course commercial and small businesses, don't really know and will be affected. So I think it's our job here to help with the education process. Y'all, I think the most important thing, we gotta make them aware that they will put families out of their homes, and that's their most valuable asset. Thank you. And Mr. Miller, thank you very much for